Hi. So this video covers the Transfer of Property Act. It is an old act of 1882 and a primary property related legislation in India, along with the Sales of Goods Act. So this topic, as you shall see, is closely connected and related to the contracts chapter. Interestingly, this act only deals with immovable property. For movable property, we have the Sales of Goods Act, which will be covered in another video shortly. The four types of transfers mentioned in the act are listed here, which will be explained further on in this video. So to understand who can transfer property, it is important to know what is the scope of this act, as in what implies as an immovable property, what qualifies as an immovable property. So to explain that with an example, I proceed that so immovable properties essentially needs to be attached to the ground and it can't be moved. For example, a tree or a building, that is an immovable property and that is the subject of this act, not the Sales of Goods Act. But for example, growing crops or grass which are intended to be cut and then sold, they qualify as movable property because they were sown or grown with the intent of them being cut and sold. So that becomes a movable and not immovable property, unlike regular trees. So the third point here, unfit by law, it sometimes encompasses criminals or any other classification as the law may classify. For example, in Kashmir, there are complicated clauses where mostly only Kashmiris can buy and sell property. So it varies state by state and is not a uniform thing, but there are many classifications of, for example, mentally ill people are declared unfit by law, insolvents, and so on. These are the only four categories who can transfer property. The fourth point is often tested in legal reasoning, which is pretty easy. The questions are pretty easy from this point. So these are the four essential conditions to be met for a transfer to be registered and deemed lawful. Encumbrances is a legal word often asked in legal knowledge. Types of transfers. Please pause the video to read the entire text. Okay, so lease can be understood as a sale for a fixed period of time because it is indirectly that. And to understand exchange, it's best to think of it as the barter system which was prevalent in the earlier times. And please note that as you can see, gift is the only type of transfer which takes place without consideration. So it is unilateral. So this is all the theory involved. Now let's move to some questions from past year papers. This was a controversial question of CLAT 2013. So the principle and fact according to me are a little disconnected. But the best answer according to me should be C. Don't worry about such questions where you can't really get the answer from the principle itself. There is a little disconnect. As every year, such questions are prevalent and sometimes they are cancelled or everyone's given a mark. Like in CLAT 2017, there were 4 questions which were cancelled. So indirectly, the question paper was out of 196 and not 200. So please don't fret or panic when on seeing such questions. And even if you get them wrong, it's no harm. There is always such scope for error in legal reasoning. This is a short question. And it's based on the legal maxim. So this maxim states that no one can give what he doesn't have. It is a popular maxim which is often tested. Please pause the video to read the entire principle. So it may seem complicated from the principle, but on going through the facts, it's a direct and non-confusing question. And the answer has to be C. So as you may have noted, questions from Transfer of Property Act are usually short ones and pretty direct ones. Like this one again. It is the example of barter system as I mentioned earlier in a way. And therefore an exchange. So moving on to the last question. This should take you less time than expected. Only because it should be solved as we read the first sentence of the facts. That is, A sold his car to B. The additional information mentioned there is irrelevant for this particular principle because it talks about ownership, and ownership is granted as soon as A sold his car to B. So the answer has to be A. Sorry, this was the last question. So as you may remember, there was a essential condition in the part of the video where there was a condition where the property has to be transferred between living persons, and this is a clear violation of that condition, and therefore the answer has to be B. If you remembered those 4 points, this could have been solved theoretically as well. So that is it for this video and this topic. Mostly property related questions come from the contracts topic, and that's why I said this topic and contracts are closely related. As usually any transfer which takes place involves contracts, and they are basically interlinked. So please post any doubts you may have. Thank you and good luck.